You can draw this in Procreate. You can draw this landscape with a lighthouse by just following this video all the way till the end, because I will show you every single step and we'll just be using the brushes that are already in Procreate. If you find this tutorial to be a little bit challenging, then don't forget you can always just hit pause, rewind, and take your time. And once you've reached the finish line, don't forget to share your work on Instagram and tag me in the image. That way I will be able to find your work and perhaps we'll see it in the next You Can Draw This video. Are you ready? Let's get started. I have created a color palette for you, which you can download for free through the link in the description in case you want to use the exact same colors I'm using in this video. If you want to use the same brush sizes as well, then be sure to set your canvas to the same size. That's 3000 by 2000 pixels. Oh, and if you want the colors to look the same, then also be sure to set it to srgb color profile. First thing we'll do is paint our sky, and we'll do that by using the soft brush, which you can find under airbrushing. We will start off with this bright blue. That's the first color in the color palette. And the brush, well, the opacity is set to 40%. And we can make it pretty big. Let's go for 10%. We are going to fill our sky. You can just make horizontal strokes, and since the opacity is pretty low, you will have to make multiple strokes to make it more opaque, but that way you can slowly build up your colors. So I always prefer to work with low opacity brushes, or the ones that have the pen pressure set to opacity. Now let's go for a brighter, lighter blue. And we'll go over that center area, adding some of that brighter blue. And just keep making these horizontal strokes, gradually building up that color. Then we'll go to the color palette again and grab that lighter blue. And we'll drop that down here, adding some lighter blue, some less saturated blue to our sky. And down here, that's where the water and the sand will be, so don't worry too much about that area. Now, finally, I want to grab this grayish blue and drop that at the bottom. It'll be near the horizon. Let's make the brush a little bit smaller. I'll go for, well, let's say 7%, and make a darker area here. And you can make multiple strokes, building it up a little bit. And if you want your gradient to look more smooth, then you can go to the magic wand in the menu. That's the adjustments. Then go to Gaussian blur and slide your finger or your pen to the right to add a slight blur. I will go for around 10%. Next step will be the water. Let's make a new layer. For that, we'll go to the layer menu and click the plus to create a new layer. First thing I'll do is make a selection. Go to the S-shaped ribbon, set the selection tool to rectangle. Let's move our canvas up a little bit. Start here in the bottom left corner and drag your selection up to about here. Not too high. And now we can fill this selection by going to our palette, and let's pick this dark blue. And you can just drag in the circle to fill that selection, and then you can click the S-shaped ribbon again to get out of the selection menu. This will be our horizon, and it is looking way too crisp right now. In real life, it really wouldn't look this crisp. So let's go to the blur menu, the Gaussian blur in the adjustment menu, and let's add a slight blur to this layer. And you really only have to do it just a little bit. Let's say around 3.5%. That's fine. And I will start painting on this water layer. But to make sure that we don't go outside of the edges of this shape, we'll go to the layer menu, click layer 2, which has the water on it, and use alpha lock. Now this layer is locked. Wherever there's no paint yet, no paint will show up when we start painting, only on that shape that we already created. Now let's start creating a gradient here as well, just like we did with the sky. So let's still use that soft brush. And let's add some of these blue. Well, it's not really blue, it's more towards green almost, but let's add that color to our water. I'll go back to 10% for the brush size. And I'll go up from the bottom, adding a little bit more color variation to our ocean here. And it'll be a bit lighter at the bottom and darker near the horizon. The next step is to add our little beach, our sand, and let's create a new layer for that. So we'll go to the layer menu, click the plus for a new layer, and let me use the soft airbrush for this step. And for the color, we will start with this dark sandy color. The brush opacity is set to 50% and the brush size is set to 50%. And now let's make a shape that starts in the corner here and it goes up towards the right side. Let's make a shape that looks a bit like this, with a little slope. You can just fill it like this. That's the sand for our lighthouse. You can just fill it in by hand. I already want to give it some color variation, even though we are going to work on it a bit more at a later stage. But let me grab this lighter sand color as well, to add some lighter colors to this lower left side of our sand. And because I'm using a low opacity brush, it gives me a lot of control. You can make multiple strokes, slowly building that up. And we are definitely going to add some more texture to the sand later on. But we want a nice base for our lighthouse to stand on. And that's what we're creating here. Now I would like to work on the water again. We'll go back to the water layer. That's layer 2. And I want to add some watery texture. Even though water doesn't really have a texture, but you know what I mean, right? We'll add some water effect there. And we'll use a brush that you can find under elements. It's the oceans brush. And we can use this brush to add that texture, that effect. And let's first start with that dark blue that we used near the horizon. And I also want to just turn my canvas a little bit. It makes it more easier to make these strokes. I have the opacity set to 65%. And let's make the brush a little bit small, maybe 5%, because near the horizon, this effect will be very small. It's so small that you can barely see it. But that's okay, because then you can slowly just build it up. So we'll add some of these darker waves on this greener area, and you can switch to that greenish color and paint that over that area near the horizon. You can see I'm just making these horizontal strokes, giving that slight texture. And as we move to the front, we can go back to that blue color again and make the brush a little bit bigger. Let's say 12%. Because as you move towards the front, those little waves will appear to be bigger. Now finally, I would like to switch to that very light color here. And we'll add some lighter wave effects here near the front. And I'll keep making these horizontal strokes, adding the most of these lighter waves to this area in the front. And if your brush is acting a little wonky, if perhaps your waves are vertical instead of horizontal, then what you could do is go to the brush menu, click that brush, then go to grain in this case, and then click edit, and you can just flip the grain. You can just flip it, and that should fix your brush if it's acting wonky. Now let's get started with the exciting part. Let's start drawing our lighthouse. I will make a new layer for that, so we'll go to the layer palette and go on top of that sand layer, of course. So first click layer 3, then click the plus to create a new layer for our lighthouse. For our lighthouse, we will pick a nice bright red. It's that first color here at the bottom in the color palette. And for our brush, we will go to the calligraphy brushes and use the monoline brush. It is set to 100% opacity and the size is set to 2%. And we'll start off creating our lighthouse by creating an oval. We can do it around here. Draw an oval and hold your pen in place. And then you can go to edit shape here at the top. And you can move it around, make your oval smaller, make it broader, do whatever you like with your oval. I want it to be like straight. Something like this should be fine. Now I would like to use this oval as kind of like a base for our entire lighthouse. So I would like to save this oval. So I'll just duplicate this layer by swiping to the left, and I'll turn off this oval so I can just keep it around in case I need it at a later point. So now first let me duplicate this new oval that I created. You can just duplicate the layer again, or you can swipe down with 3 fingers and hit copy and paste. I will move this one downward, but do be sure that you have your move tool set to magnetics. That way you can easily drag it down in a perfectly vertical line. And also be sure that you set it to uniform if you want to make your oval a little bit bigger. So we're making it a little bit bigger. The bottom part of the lighthouse will be a bit broader than the top. So I've created a bigger oval here. Now we'll go to the brush again and we'll create a vertical, slightly diagonal line from the bottom to the top. I do feel like we can move that top part up a little bit. So I'll go back to this layer then to the move tool and drag it up just a little bit to about there. Okay, now I'll go to the brush and connect these parts. I'll start here at the bottom, drag up, hold your pen in place, and that way you can create a perfectly straight line. You can even go to edit shape and move these anchor points around. And then we'll go to the other side from the bottom all the way to the top. Use edit shape to adjust it if needed. And then we have this nice cone shape. Now we can't fill our shape yet because these shapes are on different layers, so we will need to merge them. This one at the bottom, that was our extra oval, so we won't be touching that one. We will just merge these top two. And now you can just drag in the color circle and fill this shape. And perhaps you'll need to move the threshold a bit so that all the lines are perfectly filled. And fill this part and this over here as well. Now I would like to add a white ring to our lighthouse. And we'll use that base oval that we saved here. Duplicate it again. And I'll put it at the top. I don't want this oval to be red though, I want it to be white. The way you can do that is first by turning it on. Then we'll click the layer and turn on alpha lock. Then we'll grab the white color over here. And then you can go to the layer again, click it, and select fill layer. And now we have a white oval. And we'll use this one to create that ring around our lighthouse. Let me just turn off alpha lock. And we'll use the gesture again. We'll swipe down with 3 fingers, use copy and paste, and we'll move this ring downward to about here. And let's make it slightly bigger by pinching out our fingers and make sure that it touches those edges of the lighthouse. It shouldn't be overlapping too much, but it shouldn't be not touching the edges either. So if you zoom in, you can see that it's slightly over the edge, and that's great. Now I want to move that other one down a little bit, so I'll go to layer 4, one of the layer 4s in any case, but the one with the white ring. Go to the move tool and move it down just slightly. And again, I'll make it a little bit bigger so that it'll touch the edges. To fill the shape, we will have to merge these layers again. So let's pinch them together. And before we fill it, we will need to connect these sides. So let's do that. We can do it a little bit messy. Don't worry. Because what we will do is use a clipping mask. We'll click this layer and set it to clipping mask. Now it is clipped to the lighthouse layer, and whatever is on this layer, it'll only show up on the shape of the layer that's below. So let's fill our shape. We'll fill this part and this part, but this part, that's the part we'll remove. Let me turn around our lighthouse a little bit, and let's use the eraser tool. I have my eraser set to monoline. Now I'll just go along that edge to tidy this up here. And our lighthouse has a nice white ring. Let's move up. I would like to make another shape on top of our lighthouse. So let's duplicate this ring again, that base ring that we saved. Let's duplicate it. Let's turn on the layer, turn on alpha lock again, and we'll use fill layer again so that our ring will be white. And now let's go to the move tool and move it up for the top part of our lighthouse. Actually, I need 2 rings, so let's duplicate it. We can use the 3-finger swipe down again and use copy and paste. Now let's move it down just to this top and turn off the move tool. Now all we have to do is connect these 2 parts. We can go to the monoline brush again and just connect these 2 sides. I want it to go straight down, so I'll hold 1 finger on the screen, and that way I will have a perfectly vertical line. So make a line, hold your pen in place so that it'll snap to a straight line, and then hold your finger on the screen to make a perfectly vertical line. Don't forget to merge these layers, and also make sure that alpha lock is turned off. Otherwise, you won't be able to fill it. And now let's just fill these parts. For the next step, we'll go back to our little ring again and again duplicate it by swiping to the left and clicking duplicate. We'll make it a different color again. Let's click it and use alpha lock. And this time we'll pick a color that I forgot to put in the color palette. Let's pick a very dark color, an almost black. And let me just put it in the color palette so you will be able to find it. And now let's go to the layer again, click it and use fill layer. So now we have a near black ring. Let me turn off alpha lock. And let's put it on top of the other layers. Without clipping mask, we don't need that. So click the layer and turn off clipping mask here. Let's go to the move tool and make this ring slightly bigger. And we'll move it up a little bit to about here. Let's duplicate this ring. And let's go to the move tool again to move this one up a little bit to about here. I want to move the other one down a little bit actually. I feel like it's too high. Let's go for something like that. Next, I'll duplicate the layer again and go to the move tool, and I'll make this ring slightly smaller again. And I wanted to cover that, slightly cover that red part. And I just want some slight openings on these sides. Now I want to merge these bottom 2 rings. So you can just check with these check marks if you have the right layer. So we just want these bottom 2. Let's merge these and fill that shape. Now I want this part to be gone, this lower part. Now, the way you can do that is by going to the lighthouse layer, click it, and use select. Now, if we go back to that layer with the rings, it is more easy to remove this lower part because you can only erase whatever is inside of that selection. Alright, now I want to connect this part with that top oval. So let's create a new layer and let's turn off that selection because otherwise we won't be able to draw. Use the monoline brush and let's connect these 2. like this. Make a layer, well, make a line, not a layer, make a line down. And one on this side too. You can hold one finger on your screen to make a perfectly vertical line. And let's create some more. Let's make one here, one in the middle, and one over here. Now I want to remove some parts of that circle here, that oval. So we'll go to that layer, which is called layer 4, like many other layers. And let's use the eraser to get rid of this part, for example. And let's create some more decorations here. Well, let's just merge all these layers. Now that we got this, go to the monoline brush again and let's add some extra here. We'll start at the center of this little pole and then to go to the center of this area and make a little curved line from center to center. Over here. Like that. Next, let's add the top to our lighthouse. I feel like we don't have a lot of room left at the top, so I would like to make our lighthouse a little bit smaller. We can do that by just grabbing all of these layers by swiping to the right, going to the move tool, and be sure to have it set to uniform. And I'll turn off magnetics, that's not really important right now. And let's just make it a little bit smaller, so we have a bit more room at the top. And I'll move it to the left just slightly. Alright, for the top I would like to be behind this column right here. So I'll make a layer underneath it. I'll select layer 4, this layer 4, click the plus for a new layer, and for our color I'll pick the bright red lighthouse color and use the monoline brush. First thing I'll do is make a circle. So just draw a circle, hold your pen in place, and well, it doesn't have to be a perfect circle. You can go to edit shape. You can move it around a bit. And then you can just fill that shape. And then let's just draw in a little extra touches. Let's add a little oval here. You can hold your pen in place again. Let's fill that shape. And add a smaller oval here. Just do it by hand. And you can add a little pin to the top. Now we need our little oval one more time. Let's duplicate it again. And we want to put it on top of this cone shape. And let's turn it on. Let's use alpha lock again. And for the color, we will use this bluish one. Let's go back to the layer, click it, and use fill layer. And we'll turn off alpha lock. And let's go to the move tool, turn on magnetics so we are sure that it's going up vertically in a perfect way. Let's move it up all the way here. Turn off the move tool and swipe down with 3 fingers to duplicate this layer. Just use copy paste and drag this one down to about here. Now we are going to draw some vertical lines. We'll go down a bit left from the center. Hold your pen in place and then hold one finger on the screen to make it snap to a perfectly vertical line. And let's do the same here. Like that. And now we can merge these layers so we are able to fill the shape. And we don't want to fill the entire shape. We just want to fill this part and this part. We are going to remove the rest of it because this will be our window. Let's grab the eraser. And you can make well, you can do the same thing here. You can hold your pen in place and make these perfectly vertical lines. Let's erase this part here. And if you don't have the patience to remove this part by hand, you can just go to the selection tool, that S-shaped ribbon. Use the freehand selection tool and select this part of the shape. Now you have that selection and you can swipe with 3 fingers to erase that part. Now we'll still be using the eraser. And let's make a vertical line here and one over here. And we'll also make a little horizontal line, but it'll be a bit curved because we are following the shape of the lighthouse. So follow that shape and make a line like that. Now we have a nice little window for our lighthouse. It looks a little bit boring though. I want to give it some color variation. And we can do that by using alpha lock again. So click the layer, use alpha lock. And then let's go to the airbrushing brushes and use the soft brush. And let's pick perhaps this color of our sky and make our brush a bit smaller. Let's go for 6% and add a little bit of light here on the inside. And I want to make that top part a little bit darker. So perhaps we can use some of that black. Just add a little bit of shadow there. I like the way that looks. Now finally, I want to add a little white line at the bottom of our lighthouse here. So let's go back to that oval that we saved. This will be the last time we use it. Let's turn it on, use alpha lock, and go to the white color right here in the color palette. And let's fill it with this color. So click the layer and use fill layer. Let's turn off alpha lock. And let's move the layer all the way down. And let's also make it bigger. That's looking good. It's below all the other lighthouse layers, so that's great. Let's go to the calligraphy brushes and use the monoline brush for this. That looks way better. Alright, let's add a little bit of a line going up here. And most of this will be covered by sand, so I don't need to close the entire shape. Let's fill it. And I'll fill this in by hand. Now let me use the eraser to erase this part. We'll be covering a lot more by sand, but for now this is fine. Let's add some texture and some lighting to our lighthouse. First, let's go to the red layer that we got. That's this one right here. And to add shadow, let's use alpha lock. We'll click the layer, use alpha lock, and with alpha lock, we will be sure that we will be painting on the shape and not outside of the shape. For our brush, we'll go to the airbrushing brushes and use the soft brush. And for the color, we will use this dark red. The brush opacity is still set to 40% and the brush size is set to 5%. And let's go over this right side of the lighthouse, adding a slight shadow there. And since we are using a low opacity brush, you can make multiple strokes, slowly making it darker. And now I would like to switch to the soft airbrush, which has some more crisp edges, a little bit less soft. We have the opacity set to 50%, and for our size, let's go to 20%. I want to make a slight dark edge on this side of the lighthouse, just along that edge. And I would also like to add a shadow. Here we'll make a curve to this side. That's that railing, that part where you can walk, that's casting a shadow on the lighthouse. Of course, our white part needs some shadow as well, so let's go to that layer. That's that little white edge. Let's use alpha lock on this layer as well, and also let's use that soft brush again. And let's pick this gray color in the color palette. And again, we will just go over that right side, slowly building up that shadow there. And you can also use that soft airbrush here at the top to add a slight little shadow here as well. Since we are already using this gray, let's go to that top white part that's right here. And again, let's use alpha lock. And we'll start off with the soft brush. First, let's add a slight shadow here on the right side. Then let's switch to the soft airbrush for a tiny little shadow here at the top. Next, let's go to that little dome at the top. And again, be sure to use alpha lock so we won't be painting outside of that shape. And again, we'll use the soft brush first. For our color, we'll go to the dark red. And again, we'll focus on that right side of the shape, adding a shadow there. Then we'll switch to the soft airbrush. Let's zoom in just a little bit. We'll add a slight shadow on this little bowl. I would also like to add a little edge here at the top. And I would like to have it cover a little bit of that cone here as well. So let me make a new layer on top here. And for the brush, let's go to the inking brushes and use the dry ink brush. Let's make it pretty small. The opacity is at 100%, by the way. Let me check. I have it at 6% right now. I think that's fine. And I want to make a little edge just along the edge right here. We'll just follow that shape. And I would like to add just a little bit of texture here, actually. Makes it look a bit more interesting. Just a slight touch. You can actually also use it on that dome here a little bit. Make a little line here at the top. adding some slight texture there. And let's add a little bit of texture to that, like that body of the lighthouse as well. And to start painting on the body of the lighthouse, we will actually need to be on a layer that's on top of that body. So let's just move this layer that we were just using. Let's move it to the top. And let's turn off clipping mask. Let's turn off clipping mask because we want it to be visible on all of these layers. I do want to make the brush a little bit smaller, perhaps 1%. Let me check. Yeah, that's nice. And let's add a little bit of texture, a little bit more interest to that body. First, I'll make a line going down all the way to the bottom of the lighthouse. And then I want to make some curves that follow that shape of the lighthouse. And I'll just do it by hand. I like it to be a little bit playful. It doesn't have to be perfect. I'll go all the way down along that body of the lighthouse. I'll make them a bit more straight here near the bottom because that curve, it's going the other way around here. I think that already it looks a lot more interesting. Now let's go and add a little bit more texture to our sand. For our brush, I would like to go to the sketching brushes and use the artist crayon. And for the color, we will pick this light sandy color. And for our layer, let's create one on top of all the others. Because I want to be covering that lighthouse a bit as well. And the opacity is at 100% and the size is at 3%. And I'm going to turn around my canvas a little bit. And let's just make some kind of like vertical, low horizontal strokes over that sandy beach. Creating a nice sandy texture here. Of course, these videos, these You Can Draw This videos, those are really very step-by-step, easy videos. But if you want more, if you want to challenge yourself more, if you want to work more with textures, with realism, then I'd really suggest you check out my Patreon page, because there I have videos with, well, ranging in difficulty, but especially with the intermediate and more advanced tutorials. I don't really have this super step-by-step guide, but I show you my entire process from sketch to finished piece, and also share my thought process when I'm creating digital artworks. So that way, when you follow those videos, eventually you can create your own artworks. Let me grab this darker color again. And I'll make the brush a little bit smaller here. I'll go to 1% to cover this white area here. To make that sand cover that bottom of the lighthouse a bit. So at Patreon, I also show you how you can use reference images, photos, how you can look at those and create your own artworks from them. I'm just creating more texture here. I think it's already starting to look like lovely sand. It doesn't need much. And now let me add a drop shadow here. The light is pretty strong and it'll definitely create a dark drop shadow here on the sand. I don't want it to cover our lighthouse though. So let me make a selection of our lighthouse. Let's click that layer, use select, and now I will reverse this selection. You can do that right here. You can invert, and now we can only paint on, well, all the areas outside of that selection, outside of that lighthouse shape. So our shadow won't end up on that lighthouse. Let's grab this dark color right here, that fourth color in the color palette. And now of course we will need to go to the layer with the sand we just created, that layer on top. And now let's create that drop shadow here. Doesn't have to be too big. Just a little one. It's like the light, the sun is very high up in the sky, so that drop shadow won't be very big. And it's also a bit textured because of that sand. Always be sure to zoom out every once in a while to check out your artwork, see how it looks. I think we're doing great. Let's click that S-shaped ribbon to get out of the selection menu. For the final touch in our scene, let's work on some clouds. Let's go to a layer. Well, let's make a layer on top of our sky layer that we made, well, way back in the beginning. Feels like ages ago. Let's click the plus to create a new layer. And for our brush, we will go to the elements brushes again. You can find them, right here. And let's use the clouds brush. We will just be using this brush as a base. Let's grab a color. Let's first grab this pretty dark gray color. And like I said, we will just be using it as a base, not as a solution to create clouds. The opacity is at 100%. The size is at 15%. And let's just create some cloud shapes. And I like the edges that these clouds give. So we'll go from the left to the right with this pretty dark gray. I just want to create some nice edges here for our clouds. Let's make another cloud over here. Don't worry about the color. It'll be fine. I always like starting with some darker colors for the clouds and then lightening them up. And some clouds over here. Now that we have a basic shape for our clouds, we can click the layer and use alpha lock again. And while we still use the clouds brush, we can add some lighter colors. Let's pick this one. And let's go over some areas of the clouds, lightening them up. Since we're using alpha lock, we will only be painting on the clouds that we already created. I'm trying to keep the bottom parts of the clouds, I'm trying to keep those pretty dark. This is a great base to start with for our clouds. Let's turn off alpha lock on this layer, click it, click alpha lock, and then go to the magic wand to just give it a slight blur. So we'll go to Gaussian blur, drag your pen to the right, just slightly. Let's say around 2.5%. That's really enough. And now what I'd like to do is just go to the airbrushing brushes and use the soft brush. I'll use it at a small size, perhaps like 3%. The opacity is still at 40%. And at first I'll just keep using this light gray. And now you can just play around and work on these clouds a bit more. If you feel insecure about painting on top of these clouds, you can just create a new layer on top by clicking the plus to create a new layer. And if you're having problems with your layers, if there are too many, then you can always merge layers that you're happy with or make your canvas a bit smaller. And now by hand, I'll make these circular motions and play around with these clouds a bit, working on them a bit more and making them look less like they were created with a clouds brush. Make sure that you keep those shadow areas in your clouds. I'm making these small circular motions. And painting stuff by hand with just basic brushes, that's actually what we do at Patreon. I always use my basic flow brush set, which you'll get when you join Patreon. And we'll mostly just be painting things by hand, working on textures by hand, lighting, sketching, well, like the whole shebang. So circular motions here. Clouds are usually nice and fluffy. And yeah, they have these rounded shapes. So you can use these small circular motions to create that effect. And also do be sure to grab reference images. Don't try to paint them from memory, even though you see clouds every day. Using reference images, that really helps. I use reference images all the time. I use the reference image to create this as well. Keep making circular motions and making those top parts of the clouds lighter than the bottom parts. Let me also grab this dark color right here. You can just hold your finger on the screen to grab the color. And let me make the bottom part of this cloud a little bit darker by again making these circular motions, adding a little bit of a shadow there. Also some darker clouds over here. You're almost there. Some dark areas underneath these clouds. And let's also go to the lightest color over here. It's for some slight light touches to our clouds. And just be sure that you keep that variation in values in your cloud. So some dark shadow areas and some lighter parts. Don't go over all of these clouds with your light brush, just ending up with light blobs. You made it all the way to the end of this tutorial. You should be very proud of yourself. Thank you so much for following along this tutorial. I hope you have enjoyed it. If you did, do be sure to check out the other You Can Draw This videos as well. Or you could also just start with these two videos over here. Thanks for watching.